I ain't burnt my laptop out yet.
Do we have any other guests coming on tonight?
It's funny that you asked because one person was asking to come on, but I don't know if he's gonna make it or not, and I'm not gonna really overextend myself. So if he makes it, fine. If he don't, I'm not gonna sweat it. Okay. Right. But your day was good otherwise?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, it really didn't do a lot. Like I said, after having that booster shot, I was pretty much tired. So it's like flu-like symptoms. So
Good evening, everybody. What's going on? What's going on? It is so great to be before you again tonight. I don't know for whatever reason. Oh, because we didn't go live last week. That's why it does seem like we haven't been up here in a while, because we haven't been up here in a while. We missed a week because of the holiday.
yeah, Thanksgiving, a day to give thanks. And
Yes,
so this
yes.
goes right in line with tonight's conversation. While giving thanks, we need to forgive.
Whatever reason. Yes, yes, yes. Good evening, everybody. This is your girl, Nodella Sakajuwia Jordan, coming live. I hope that everyone enjoyed your time with if you spent it with family and or friends. I ended up spending it by myself because, stuff happens. And so my family wasn't able to make it down. But I tell you, it was definitely some much needed time, even to myself. I was actually able to get some things done that I had actually put off and forgot about that, I was supposed to do. So it was still a good time for me. I was well rested when I returned to work on Monday. So we are back here again. And I have the best co-host on the East and West Coast, and none other than Derek Walker. All right, everybody.
Everyone. Good evening.
All right. So tonight, if you have not seen the flyer, or if you also did not see my brief live this morning, tonight we are going to talk about 'tis the season for forgiveness. Ultimately, we're going to be talking about forgiveness. I think it's going to be a great conversation. And I ask that you would please share and invite others to tune into this conversation, because I know that most of us have experienced a situation in our life where we did not forgive the person immediately. It took some time, but we have people who still are holding on to things that, I think it's time for them to let go. And I know that people often say, but you don't know what happened to me. And one thing that I will never do is play down or minimize what the person has done to you. But one thing that I need to tell you is that everybody, I really need for y'all to hear this. Everybody has been through something in their life where someone has done something so devastating to them that no, ultimately they don't deserve your forgiveness. But we know that there's this saying that, you know, I see every now and then that pops up on Facebook, is forgiving them is not about them, but it's about yourself.
Well, that's the part. That's one of the goodest the things is that forgiving is healing for yourself, because
it really is.
When you hold on to that type of, I call it a grudge.
Yes.
And the reason I call it a grudge is because in your healing process, and that's why I said, while we're giving thanks, we should be giving thanks and also forgiving. So Thanksgiving and Christmas in line with each other for a reason. Because number one, giving thanks means not just giving thanks because of the pilgrimage or whatever, but giving thanks to seeing another year, giving thanks for life, liberty, family, and everything else. But the hardest part of that goes in line with December 25th, the actual real meaning of Christmas stands for Christ. And so with that being said, Christ sacrificed himself so that you can move forward and not be stuck on things that happened in the past. So Thanksgiving, giving thanks, but also Christmas, forgiving those. And so even when we say our prayers, it all aligns into forgiveness. Because over the years, I've learned that when you hold grudges, you can't sleep good at night. Every time you're seeing that person, you're having some kind of negative thought, or it makes your skin crunch or something like that. But at the end of the day, mentally, it's holding you in captivity. And so when that type of captivity overcomes you, it becomes a problem. So go ahead, Nadella. I just wanted to add that in there.
No, I agree with what you're saying, is that because my focus is primarily you know, for those who say that they're a believer, who said that they're Christian, they're a child of God, we have to always remember that although in the flesh, and even to some degree, we are justified for feeling the way that we do about a person and towards a particular situation. But we have to remember as Christians, and if you attend church, you know, regularly, you know, scripture talks about that. Scripture says that God said he will not forgive us if we won't forgive others. And so if we continue to hold on to unforgiveness, then we are going to really, I don't want to say reap, but we're going to get the same thing back. And, you know, just from a more personal perspective, me, you know, that was something that, you know, because I had, you know, just going through so many things as a kid, you know, growing up in the inner city, some neighborhoods are really rough and tough. And, you know, I know the neighborhoods where I grew up in, if you was the new kid in, you had to prove yourself. How did you have to prove yourself? You had to fight supposedly the baddest person, and you couldn't lose. And although at the time, you know, I did what I had to do because I wasn't going to become somebody's target, but it really did play a role in my life as I began to age. Because when I was in middle school, I had teachers, I had the principal, one calling me Muhammad Ali, the other one calling me Sugar Ray Leonard, because that was the environment that I grew up in, and that's what I thought I had to do, which is, it to some degree it was because, again, of the environment. And even, you know, going into high school, I still kept that reputation. You know, I couldn't even, and don't laugh at me too hard, because I couldn't even hardly get any dates in high school
But let's
because the
say this.
guys were afraid of me. They was, and I didn't find out until after we graduated high school. And I remember one guy, and I'll call him a friend because he was always good to me, and you know, we always rolled good. So he was like, Nodella, I'm gonna tell you. He said, I know I'm a Bassamite. He said, but girl, I ain't never seen nobody like you who could throw hands and still make the honor roll.
But see, that's the thing. And I'm gonna say this because again, I was not a fighter in school, but I will tell you that those people that like to fight or were always involved in some type of fight, I noticed that something, number one, it has a lot to do with character. So when you start talking about looking at people's character, you know, people always want to pick on the weakest person or the person they feel is the weakest. And so when you're dealing with the weakest person, that fight throughout, whether it's a physical fight or internal fight, you have to understand the purpose. Because as you said, one of the things that going through that in school, it made you stronger.
Oh, definitely.
It made you more visible of things that's going on. And throughout maturity level, you become to understand what it did or what role it played in your life.
Yes.
So I've had in elementary school, I've had a lot of fights. And I was still the quietest person, but they always wanted to pick on me because number one, they either thought that you wanted the girlfriend, or two, they were jealous of what you had going on. But at the end of the day, sometime, even being weak, you have to fight.
Yeah.
And so I learned that, you know, people see you for what they want to see you until you have to fight.
Right.
And so that's even like life now. When you have to fight, you have to figure out how to move this from one end of the room to the other end of the room, even while having the elephant in the room blocking your way. So throughout that process, even though you don't understand what you're dealing with or whom you're dealing with, the people that come in that are fighting against you, you're mentally, you're already feeling like you got to fight against them. However, what I learned to do is throughout that process is I learned to start forgiving them through the process. And the reason I learned to forgive them through the process, because they were only obstacles put in the way to test your strength and endurance.
Now, see, I was nowhere near on that planet that you was living on. Because it wasn't until, and again, and I'm sharing this because it shaped who I was. I became very hardened. I loved my family, but I couldn't feel it because I became very hardened. I loved my daughter, but I couldn't feel it because I became very hardened. And so as I got older, I kept it with me. And so every time I had a confrontation with somebody, after I got out of school, once I graduated from high school, you know, the fighting wasn't there because I'm like, listen, I'm grown, you grown. Now, if you come up in my face, it's on and popping. But, you know, and as long as you don't call me out my name, then you get to live another day and I'll get to stay free another day. And so my mindset did change some once I became an adult, because I'm like, I'm an adult now. I'm like, who fights as a grown-up? You're supposed to be a grown-up. And so I really worked to not get into physical confrontations and as well as arguing. I really hate arguing. It's very stressful. But what I still did not deal with was that growing up in that environment hardened my heart. And the things that people did to me, I mean, I was constantly people attempting to jump me. And I just want to also clarify, I didn't go around picking fights. The reason why I got into many fights, for whatever reason, you know, these girls always wanted to fight me. I grew up in a household where my father was like, listen, you don't back down from no fight. And if you get beat up when you come home, you're going to get another whipping. And so when we got into fights, you know, we made sure we did not lose. And, you know, many of us may not even realize how much that really shapes us. You know, you may say, well, we got into it and then I was done with it. But were you really?
And see, the other part to that is some part of that will mentally scar you. Because
and that's what, yes.
So when you're scarred, it's hard to get rid of that scar because, again, it was a part of you that you grew with. So
and when I would see those girls that I had a fight with, I'm like, if you come near me, I'm going to dust you. So tying all that into with, you know, our topic tonight is that I did not, even though I won the fight, there was still some unforgiveness there for whatever reason, even though I won.
Well, and I guess to me, growing up in that type of situation, it's the element that you felt like you were disrespected. And everybody growing up in our period, this thing about respect and disrespect. If I hung out with you and all of a sudden me and you fell out over somebody else, I felt like I was disrespected. So now we got to fight.
Right.
Or now we got to compete. And so the line of disrespect that you felt at that point there, to me, when I was growing up, was like, okay, I'm not going to be dealing with these people. So you start cutting people off, not realizing that when you start cutting people off, you're cutting yourself off as well. So, and now I'm not saying that you're not supposed to cut everybody off.
Right.
But one of the things about it is that there's some people that come into your circle are there to build you up. So, and there are some that comes in to test you. There are some that comes in to help you endure. And then there's some that says basically, you know what? I can't deal with it. And so the elements that surround that type of situation, it grooms you to who you become.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But one of the things, as I shared, is what component I didn't realize is that emotionally and mentally, I had these feelings about these individuals that eventually it comes to the fact that I did not forgive them because, again, believe it or not, it wasn't my desire to fight. I really did not like fighting, but growing up in the type of community that I did, it was either you fight or you get your butt beat every day. And that was not an option for me. So I was basically between a rock and a hard place to some degree, where it was that, and there was no such thing as you walking away from a fight. Because again, that environment, if you walked away, they would start swinging on you. It wasn't a matter of if you say, nah, I ain't gonna fight you. If you stand there and say, I'm not gonna fight you, they would still swing on you. And
but
so
see, I can even put this in line with domestic violence.
Definitely.
And so when you look at a person who's being abused or battered,
yes,
they stay there because they're scared.
Absolutely.
And so when they're scared, they're not going to do anything, or they're scared to fight back.
Right.
So it's not until the time that they learn to fight back, because mentally, and we talk about the elements again, the mind controls a lot of things of movement. And so when we decide to move on or get past it, there are some things that we have to do. Number one, we have to build strength.
Yes.
So when we start talking about building strength, we start talking about learning to first love yourself.
Yes.
And so when people allow other people to take over them mentally,
Mhm.
they don't really love their self,
Mhm.
and they don't love the situation that they're in, but they've been in the situation so long that they accept the situation.
Yes.
And so when it's time to move out of the situation, and if you pay attention to people that get out of domestic violence situation, especially women, it has to
Mhm.
be planned on how you're going to leave.
Yes.
And because if you don't plan it, every time you're going to fall back into the same trap.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you learn to first identify how you're going to get out. Second
Yes.
of all, you got to find trusted people to help you get out.
Yes.
Then you have to find the strength to get out.
And see, a lot of us don't have those, if you will, those tools available. A lot of us don't have those things in place because, again, that was the environment that was created. And once I became an adult and I started working and then I was going to school, at that point I was ghost, so nobody was hardly seeing me because I was going to school full time during the day, and then I was working. I would go immediately to work. By the time I got home, it was between 9 and 10 o'clock at night. So everybody else is, pretty much there, they're home or whatever. um so I think that really helped me because the mentality still was, and I still have that mentality somewhat today, but it's like so much more controlled. However, I do let people know, listen, I'm not the one. Now, I'm a very nice person. I'll give you, as my mama taught us, I'll give you the shirt off my back. I'll give you the last dollar, last $5 I have to help you out. But don't approach me in a manner where I feel threatened, because now I'm going to have to defend myself.
But
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 it took me so many years, Derek, to work through that,
and
to
that
get to this point,
and,
because all of that was, I'm sorry, all of that was, so with that was also wrapped up in it was unforgiveness. There was a lot of unforgiveness that I had that I
remember
just ignored.
remember this is that the more that you go and you deal with it, the more layers you're putting on.
Right.
So when you're dealing with all these layers also cause you to become bitter. These
Oh, I was very bitter. Yeah,
and
I
so
was very bitter.
with those layers, you learn that it's hard to trust people with these.
And that, yeah,
And so even with these layers, you put yourself in situations because you don't want to talk or share with anybody.
mhm,
But I've learned that when you put on these layers, it takes more to take off all these layers because now you're dragging all of this stuff with you.
yes,
So when you have a decent relationship, because of all these built up layers that you're bringing along with you, now you're bringing that into a relationship or marriage, and the other person don't have a clue what's going on.
right, because they may not have grown up in that type of environment, but also let us be mindful that for a very long time, Blacks did not have the resources to get the proper counseling that they needed. The closest thing to getting any kind of professional counseling was going to a church, to the pastor of a church, perhaps in your neighborhood or wherever. Um, and that was about as close as it was. Other than that, we was really taught to tough it out, to be tough about it, suck it up, and just keep it moving, not realizing the harm that we was really causing ourselves. And I'll be a little transparent, because after a while, all of that unforgiveness, bitterness, that anger, that wrath that I had, it literally started making me sick. It
And then
literally started making me sick.
and then
And
in some
so,
places it causes people to even act out. So
yeah,
and so people are wondering why other people are acting out. You don't know what their experience or what they've been through, that nobody paid them attention, and now all of a sudden they're acting out. But you we're passing judgment on these people instead of sitting down sometime and having a one-on-one conversation, not asking them to their business, because sometimes they want somebody to talk to. But
Yes.
because they had to hide and keep things in for so long,
Yes.
now it has
Yes.
to come out somewhere or another.
And you're spot on, because that's how it was for me. The other thing is that we have to reach a point of recognizing. We have to, just like we have to recognize, anything else, excuse me, we also have to recognize that we have internalized so much that, again, if it's not dealt with, and then if it's not dealt with properly, like I said, for me, it really literally began to make me sick. I would go to the doctors and they were like, Miss Jordan, we can't find anything wrong with you. We give you a clean bill of health. And I'm like, yo, I'm telling you something's wrong. And it wasn't until, when I tell you years later, I'm talking about, I'm in my 30s, when it, if you will, God shined a light on me and allowed me to see what it was that was making me sick. And so at that point, I had a decision to make, to either hold on to it or to let it go. And I really looked at certain situations that happened in my life to say, do I really want to hold on to this?
But you know what it took for me to do, Nadella? It took for me to actually go away by myself to be with myself. And when I say that, is because when you go away and have to deal with yourself, deal with all these issues, you start identifying what role you played in it.
Absolutely.
And then once you identify what role you played in it, and some of us don't understand, some of the roles that we play in it is that we pacify the situation. We pacify the person.
Yeah, we definitely had a role to play.
And
absolutely.
So when we don't identify our role that the person had was allowed to get that power over us, then we start passing judgment and blaming.
Yes.
But it's only when you get to yourself, and you have to first learn to forgive yourself, because you have to learn to forgive yourself for even allowing yourself to be put in that situation.
And that was the hardest of all forgivenesses. And I believe most everybody can, say the same for them, is that because, because I look back and I'm like, how could I be so dumb to let that happen? Because I consider myself somewhat of a smart woman. I consider myself a little savvy. And I'm like, how the heck did I let this happen? And so it was difficult for me to forgive myself, but I needed to, so I guess I perhaps did mine backwards, because I think most people, they, try to get you to forgive yourself first and then work on the other. But for me, I did it backwards. I worked to forgive everybody else, and then I put myself last, because a part of me still was like, what I need to forgive myself for. But once I got through the, if you will, the first process of forgiving everybody else, and I said to God, I had, prayed. I actually, I didn't go away, but I went to the church and I shut in at the church by myself. And, I got on the altar and I just began to pray. I began to cry out and I said, God, I need for you to take this away from me, but I need for you to help me to work through it. And I said, because this is too much now. I don't want this anymore. I want to be done with it. And so I did, like you said, I did pull away. I didn't go away physically. I just went to the church, which was always a place of solace for me. And he helped me to do just that. And there was times even during that process when, I said, well, this person really don't need my forgiveness. But then I can't say, well, God, I need for you to help me to forgive everybody, and then pick and choose. Well, no, I'm not ready to forgive them yet. When I work through all of that and I say, you know what, bump it. I said, I want it all gone. I said, I want it all gone. And again, as you said, it is a process. And it's a process that I went through. It wasn't an easy process, but it was a process that I was willing to go through because I was tired of carrying all that unforgiveness and all that bitterness and anger and all that craziness. I was like, I was done with it. And once I was done, one of the things that I asked God to do also is that I said, God, no matter what a person does to me in the future, help me not to harbor unforgiveness again ever in my heart. I know that, again, what they've done, it hurt me and so forth and so on. But when I think about all that unforgiveness that I held on to, I'm like, I just have disciplined myself that I'll limit my interaction with you if I interact with you at all. So that's part of my process of how I got through being able to forgive others. And again, as we talked about a little while ago, and that, the saying is, don't forgive them for their sake, but forgive them for your sake. I really did have such a peace about me. I really did, a peace that I had never experienced before, a joy that I never experienced before, the love that I knew I had for others that was dear to me. I was actually able to feel that love because I finally let that unforgiveness go.
But one of the craziest things is people sit there and they say the Lord's Prayer every night. And they've never sat to analyze that even in the Lord's Prayer, it talks about forgiveness. And so the idea is that if we really are sincere about when we say the Lord's Prayer, it asks us to ask for people to forgive us what we do against them, as well as us forgive them for what they did against us. And so a lot of times we don't analyze that part of it. We say we're Christians, we say we're in the church and everything, but it's harder for us to forgive than people out in the street. And to me, we have gotten to a point where we're teaching our kids the same garbage about not forgiving or holding grudges against people. And they're having the most hardest and the most complicated time trying to live, trying to survive because somebody did them wrong. And so they can't see clearly because all they keep seeing is what was done to them or to their parents or throughout the generations. And they're stuck in one gear or in one location and can't move to the next because of that same circle that we're not willing to get out of.
Absolutely. And one of the things, even as you was talking, is that we have either subliminally, unintentionally, or intentionally passed on that characterization, if you will, of like you said, children are very attentive, whether even at times we think that they're not paying attention. Listen, these children be paying a whole lot more attention than what you think. And so just quickly, so I was watching Paternity Court today. And so the guy and the girl was going back and forth. And so the guy said that the baby, and when I say baby, obviously not an infant, but it was a young child who told him, because so the question was whether the little girl was his. So he goes to the house. This was prior to today's show. He goes to the house to visit the little girl. And so a little kid comes out and says, "That's not your daughter."
Well, I grew up on the syndrome.
How do a little kid have such knowledge? And so the judge says, "Wait a minute. How, you said a what?" He said, "Yeah, a little kid came up to me and said, she's not yours anyway."
But
so
the problem,
he
is that
pointed out the fact that that child heard somebody's conversation.
And that's what I was about to say, because people will sit around and have these conversations. I grew up on the mama's babies, daddy's maybe syndrome. And at the end of the day, it's a difference between a father and a daddy.
Absolutely.
And so people don't understand that regardless of, you might not be biological or blood, but if you raise that child, you're a daddy. And so whether a child is, and I had to learn this, is that make sure your kids don't hear what they shouldn't be hearing.
Absolutely, yes.
And so the thing, and when you sit around and have these conversations, be careful what you say in the conversation, because kids even analyze what you say, or they'll come back and start asking questions. And even though you're telling them to get out of your way or get out of your face or whatever, these conversations are still within their mind.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so as you said, even with paternity court, that kid had to be in some area while you were having a conversation with somebody else. Or let's just say this, you have some people that are so bitter with the other
Yes.
parent
Yes.
that they make comments or unnecessary comments to make the child hear it.
Mhm.
So for instance, people will say, oh, your daddy's not nothing. He's never done nothing, don't want to do nothing, never be nothing, and you're going to be just like your daddy.
Yes.
So then you wonder why that
The
child
yes.
into that same cycle, because
Yes.
you never gave them encouragement. You told them that they were going to be like somebody that you felt wasn't doing nothing or succeeding.
Absolutely.
And so, and that's why I say we as parents need to forgive ourselves, because some of these things that we've taught our kids, it's because we said things that we shouldn't have said in their presence.
Right.
We've vocalized our feelings in front of our kids or to
Yes.
our kids.
Yes.
And then we're wondering why they're saying certain things.
Absolutely, yes.
Because we've allowed them to go outside of being a kid and now
Yes.
being a friend.
Yes.
Because again, those conversations you don't have with your kids, you have with the friend.
Absolutely. So Kia says awareness is key. So many times we adjust and adapt, but don't address, so it manifests in other ways. Addiction issues are usually a definite indicator of a mental health trauma. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more, Kia. And, again, that's, I'm tapping into, my personal experiences of, having that unforgiveness. And because I didn't know how to deal with it, I didn't have anybody who I could go to deal with it, because again, during our time of growing up, those things, everything was swept under the rug. Everything was shoved in the closet. Everything was pushed in the basement or pushed in the attic, just simply not get dealt with.
But you know what, Nadella, and I'm glad that was brought out, because now you wonder why your family has a whole bunch of drunks in your family.
Yeah.
Why you have a whole bunch of drug addicts in your family.
Yes.
Because there was some type of trauma that happened in their life that pushed them to become that person.
Yes.
And they never dealt with it. So the bottle became their friend.
Yes.
Because again, no one wanted to either listen or they had nobody that they can go to.
Yes.
Number two, a drug addict, because again, they had to run. They were running away from something or someone.
Absolutely, yes.
And it got them so far away that the only way that they can thinking, let's say that, thinking that they can make it through another day is, let me get the bottle. Let me get a hit. Yes. But at the end of the day, all of these highs, whether it's alcohol high or drug high,
don't forget food and sex.
Food and sex, those things are our grudges or our crutches.
Yes.
To number one, forgiveness.
Yes.
Because if we identify that these are all the problems, drugs, alcohol, sex, all of these crutches,
yes,
or food, these are things that we hold on to as a security blanket.
Absolutely.
And those are not necessarily security blankets for us.
Right.
Those are things that we use to identify to keep us from facing reality.
You're 100% correct. But at some point, you are going to be forced to deal with it. but it still sends you back to whatever it is you chose to help you to cope with it. Because, okay, so I'll say, so when I got to that point of saying, I don't want to deal with this anymore, when God began to deal with it and we began to, go through and process, the things that I had experienced to cause me to feel the way that I did, I could have either, well, initially I told God, I said, never mind. Actually, let me be honest. So at first I told God, I said, that's okay. But it was what, maybe, let's just say 1 or 2 weeks when I said, you know what? All right, let's do this. And I said to God, I said, I will do my best to try to not slap your hand away. And I'm using that analogy because, like, when you fall and you get a scrape and the parent is trying to clean it, especially back then they was using alcohol, and you're like, no. So I said, God, I'll do my best to try not to slap your hand away. I said, because I know it's going to hurt. I said, but I got to do this. And so even once you reach that point of to confront what it is that you've been hiding and running from all these years, if you're not ready, it will actually send you right back into that cycle if you're not ready. But I was ready, and so I forged through it. It wasn't easy, but I forged through it.
Listen, I had to learn that sometimes in order to deal with self, you have to be by yourself. And so a lot of people go looking for, this relationship don't work. Oh, well, let me go find somebody else because I can't be alone.
Yes.
And the problem with the can't be alone syndrome is you either A, allow somebody to control you,
yes,
or B, you controlling everything within your circle, and that person that you're dealing with or in a relationship with, you have to control it. Mm-hmm. And so with the control syndrome, it's a problem. And yes. I'll come back to that. The other part to that is, and I will tell you, being in a relationship sometime, if you don't identify your weaknesses in that relationship, yes, or your problems in that relationship, and you don't discuss it with the other person, yes, you become bitter and the other person becomes bitter. And the reason, and then when both of y'all are bitter, y'all always feuding, y'all always arguing, y'all always fighting. And the idea is that nobody is sitting there thinking clear-headed, because now everybody has kind of got to the point where they're against each other. So then what you do is you go out and you add family members in it by voicing your opinion, and that's not the whole total story of what's going on. But because that's the way you feel, you involve everybody else into your mess. Yeah. And so then when it's time for you to get out of your mess, imagine how much cleanup that you have to do to get out of that mess. Because now people are going to start seeing you for who you are. People are going to start seeing the other person for who they are. And then everybody involved in it is going to say, I wish I never got involved in it, because had I seen the middle point, I would have had a clear picture of what was going on.
I had a couple of those, yeah.
But our problem is that sometimes we involve ourselves in mess and then get mad at everybody else because of the mess. And then you want everybody to forgive you, but you're not willing to forgive them because, but again, you brought yourself in their mess.
And oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Nadella. Go ahead.
Nadella, no, I thought you was done. Go ahead.
No, and so the problem is that everybody's not willing to forgive everybody, but you brought yourself in the middle of a situation that you shouldn't have been in, number one. Number two is that sometimes people pull you into their situation, and then when it's time to play the forgiving role, we have gotten so wrapped up in their situation that now we've gotten emotional. Yes. So we've gotten emotionally attached to their situation, and so we're not willing to forgive because we've taken a side.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
So go
And
ahead.
so you tapped in one point, but I want to acknowledge Cynthia says, I have learned that too. And she had commented a few minutes ago, going back to when you reach that point of saying, okay, let me deal with it, you'll find out whether you're ready to deal with it or not. Because as I said, if you're not, then you're going to tuck tail and run. It is only when you are ready, when you are truly ready to deal with it. Again, I can remember as a kid, when I got a scrape and my mother or my father would go to clean, I'm like, wait. And my mother like, girl, I ain't even do nothing. I said, I know, but it's gonna hurt.
What's that say? I ain't even touch you yet.
Yes. And she's like, I said, yeah, but I know it's gonna hurt. Well, how do I know it's gonna hurt? Because the last time I had scraped up or whatever, you cleaned it, it was painful. Not that she caused the pain, but the healing, my God, the healing
you
process.
just got where I was getting ready to go. The healing process.
Healing process
you have to go through. You're gonna have to feel some pain.
The pain, yes. And so a lot of us, we anticipate in advance, this is going to hurt. But the question is, which one is going to hurt more? You staying in that unforgiveness state, or you go through the healing process? Which one is really going to hurt more?
Because the longer you stay, the more pain that you're going to feel.
Yes.
And so you tap right into where I was going, because dealing with the pain, and to me, I'll tell you, I'm be transparent. When I left to go get to know myself, it was painful being by myself, because when you're used to being in a relationship with somebody else, and now all of a sudden you have to identify yourself, it's painful, because you want that relationship, you want that closeness, you want everything that you used to have. But during the pain process, even with the scab, do you realize that when you get a cut, the problem is not the cut. The problem is the healing process. Because all of the ointments and all of the ingredients and things that you have to do to cover it and keep it clean. And and when you have to keep it clean and cover it up, and when I say cover it up, that means basically it's not for everybody to see and touch.
Right.
And that's the thing, is that we share a lot of stuff with other people that they're not supposed to be there to see and touch what's going on in your situation, because again, they interject negativity into that situation.
Right.
Instead of you seeing it for what it was, and then you start putting the blame on the other person.
Yes.
And that's the craziest part, is that with the cut, you see it, it bleeds, you clean it, eventually it heals.
Yes.
That's just like life and things that happen in your life. They're there for learning periods. They're there to teach us a lesson. If you fall off the ladder because you were told not to get on the ladder, do you blame the ladder or do you blame yourself?
You have to blame yourself, but your average person would blame the ladder. Well, the ladder should have held me. The ladder don't move except you move it.
And then the other problem with it is, how did you position the ladder? And so people don't realize is how you position yourself.
Absolutely.
It is how, whether you fall or whether you stand up. So when you fall, you can't blame nobody but yourself, because this is where you positioned yourself.
Absolutely.
So when you position yourself in an awkward situation, expect awkward things to happen.
But that's the problem, is that another issue that also, as a layers, that we don't always want to take responsibility or accountability for what we've done to bring the situation on us. And I know that there is some things that I experienced. And when I think about it, as we was talking, I looked at it and said, you know what, if I had done one thing different, there's a strong possibility that situation would have never happened. So there, you have to take accountability for whatever contribution you made. Even like you said not too long ago, Derek, is that the fact that you allowed someone else to do that to you, you got to take ownership of that, because people typically can only do to you what you allow them to do to you. So you can't just say that they're a bad person. Okay, so how were they able to do what they did to you for you to label them a bad person? You gave them access, and you gave them access even knowing that this is a bad person.
That's true.
So you can't sit here and blackball a person. You can't burn their name and say, oh, I wouldn't deal with that person. And I'm not just talking about in relationally in terms of, between a romantic couple, but I'm talking about friendship and familyship, workship. We have to take ownership for when we allow people access, and we know in advance, in some cases, that they're no good. And again, going back to our growing up, our parents knew which of our friends was not good. They were like, they ain't good. Nope.
They wouldn't allow them in their house. And you knew the ones.
They wouldn't, yeah.
And you know the ones that they allowed in their house were the ones that they thought were good. The ones that they knew were nothing but trouble. No, don't bring that person in my house. Don't even have them knock on my door.
Yeah, they had to wait outside. So, and I was like, what? My father, my mother, they got to wait outside. They can wait for you outside. I'm like, but it's raining. I don't care. They are going to wait for you.
I don't want them in my house. That was the exact word. If I tell you I don't want them in my house, I mean I don't want them in my house.
Yeah.
And so that, and the reason they said that is because they saw, they didn't even have to ask nobody out the street. They saw it within the person that the person was no good.
And they was pretty, and I'll give them their just due credit, is that they was pretty good in judging our friends. And, even when it came down to dating, my father was actually really good with that. But again, we being who we are, he's so cute or she's so cute. And so then, you go and get in this relationship, or either you form a friendship, a bond, and then it don't work out. And with my father, you didn't have to tell him anything. Let me tell you something, my father was good. He already knew. So he was like, so what happened to that fella? I'm like, what fella? The fellow that was over here. Oh, I kicked him to the curb. And, my father was very humble about it. He didn't have to say nothing because he knew what he had already told me. But because we insist on, we know what's best for us, we go and make these decisions, and then we got to come back. But it's
funny, Nadella, how the person reveals themselves. And then you don't want to go back and tell your parents they were right, or that they told you so, because it's like, oh, well, they saw that before I saw it, while they were standing at the door, but you had to go through a little something or deal with a little hearsay or back and forth to see what your parents were saying. Yeah. And so it's funny because, nowadays parents are so not really keen on analyzing the kids that their children hang with. And that's and so they just want their kids to have friends. Yeah. So they allow their friends to hang with any and everybody.
Yeah, which is not good.
And so when they're pulled into the wrong circle, it's because we as parents have not sat and analyzed our kids' friends or who they connect with.
Yeah. So Kia says, so many times we hurt ourselves because we zigged when we should have zagged. Walking away doesn't make you a punk. It shows that you know your boundaries and will prefer not to go to jail. And that's spot on, Kia. You're absolutely right about that. Again, we have to reach a point of making a decision. And although, and I just want to say, for those of you who are just tuning in, we're talking about 'tis the season for forgiveness. And, you know, we're talking about a number of things. And although it doesn't seem like we're not talking about unforgiveness and forgiveness, we actually are, because we're talking about the situations we create that ends up going awry. And then now we're mad at the person. And so we began to, you know, harbor unforgiveness. Now, some people, they actually have the ability to where they just walk away. They don't have no feelings about it. They literally do, you know, just clean and they walk away. But for those of us who aren't made that way or wired that way, you know, we tend to harbor those emotions. And if we are not able, or if you will, also allowed to process what just happened, they definitely they definitely turn into negative emotions, which typically leads to unforgiveness. And one thing that I wanted to share earlier, and then I'm going to share also Cynthia's comment, is that I tell people last year, I think it was last year, and I was talking about unforgiveness last year on my own personal broadcast. And I said, you know, we talk about, you know, unforgiveness as if we've never done anything to anybody. Well, I can forgive them, but I can't forget. And I had to remind people, I said, but wait a minute. What about the stuff you've done to people? I said, what about you? What about the stuff you've done to people? Oh, I'm nice to everybody. No, listen, we've all, even if it was unintentionally, we've all crossed somebody wrong somewhere.
Well, wait a minute.
Even if it was unintentionally. Because understand, and I say it like that, understand my perspective of, you may not have thought that you did anything wrong to the person because, you know, you thought it was innocent or whatever the case may be. But comes to find out, you find out 10 years later that they were mad, and that's why they stopped speaking to you, because what you thought was an innocent whatever, it wasn't for them. And so we have to be mindful that even in those moments of innocence, if you will, even if what we have said or done, even if we think that it's not harmful, we always have to keep in mind, well, how do the other person feel? We can't just take for granted because we think it's not harmful, that it's not harmful to them and it has caused them pain. So just quickly, Cynthia says, speaking about access, sometimes parents can allow the wrong people access to their kids. Girl, bullseye.
And
Cynthia, and that was Cynthia.
Exactly where I wanted to go, because again, we as parents, we work so hard, we spend so much time doing other things, and we don't spend enough time with our kids. And we're allowing other people to raise our kids, to have access to our kids, to encourage our kids, discourage our kids, create havoc in your home because they have their saying about, oh, your parents are always working, they don't care about you, they don't love. This is why we have so much discouragement. This is why we have so many issues with our kids. It's because we allow other people to raise our kids, and we're not raising our kids. I'm gonna say this: we're dating our kids, but we're not raising our kids. And so when
we're not supposed to be raising them, Scripture says, "Train up a child," and there is a difference between raising and training.
And so the idea is, we spend so much time away from home. When do we train our kids?
You don't.
So we allow the streets to train them.
Yes.
We allow the people that hang around them to train them.
Yes.
But then when we wonder why our house is so disconnected, it's because we didn't train our children to be the people that they are. So then when they get older, you're trying to train somebody 20 years, 10, 15 years old and after the fact, and you think they want to hear it now because pretty much they feel like they've already been raised.
Yes, yes.
And so the line of respect now is not, they're not giving you the respect because you didn't train them.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So when the street starts giving way to training them to be out in the street, you get mad, and then you want to kick them to the curb.
Yes.
But then we don't pay attention to our fault
Yes.
in the situation, because we
Yes.
allowed that situation to happen because we didn't do our part.
Absolutely. And then there, that's a open window or open door where resentment comes in, where unforgiveness comes in at. And so, again, our topic tonight is 'tis the season for forgiveness. Another thing that I, wanted to talk about, Derek and I was talking off camera as well, is that I worded the topic the way that I did, because we also have people where on special occasions, now all of a sudden they want to be joyous, but as soon as that special occasion is over, they're back to having resentment. They're back to being unforgiving. And, if people are going to continue to say Christmas, that Christ is the reason for the season, excuse me, you can't be loving because Christmas is the reason for the season, and as soon as the season is over, you back to being Scrooge.
But see, like I said earlier too, Nadella, during our conversation, it's funny how we celebrate Thanksgiving, giving thanks before Christmas. And then we supposed to be giving thanks for family. Because again, you got to think about what Thanksgiving actually was about.
Yes.
Sharing,
yes,
loving,
yes.
and caring. So then we go right into Christmas. Now, wait a minute. I have a problem with this, because how can you, first of all, celebrate Thanksgiving, relationships, and everything else, and then come December, we're celebrating Christ, but we haven't learned the art of forgiveness. You got to think about it. When Christ got on the cross, he was sacrificing himself for all of our sins. Yes. So when somebody does that, that tells you that they love you. So Christ said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Yes. He was asking God to forgive the people who did everything against him.
Yes.
But we get these two holidays confused, where Christ came to help us. But Thanksgiving comes and all we think is we fast, we sit with each other, we laugh, and then after January 1st come, oh, I'm gonna turn over a New Year's resolution, and you fall apart until Thanksgiving and Christmas comes again.
Right. And so again, when these seasons, when the Thanksgiving, let me just narrow it down and say, when the Thanksgiving and Christmas season come, I believe they serve as a pointer of bringing people to that point of healing and letting the unforgiveness go. And like you said, they're good for the time being, because some people also got a few drinks in as well. And so they good to go. They feeling real jolly. But like you said, as soon as these two seasons or holidays are over, they go right back to where they were, even though, like you said, and I can tell you that people say, oh, I'm going to be a different person come the new year. But when the new year come, they unfortunately do go back to that old thing. So these seasons, what will happen is that if you are not ready to heal, you will feel that temporary moment of healing. It's just like I said, when, I would get scraped up, and my mother would tell me, don't you take that Band-Aid off. Well, I took it off anyway. What did I do? So the Band-Aid brought me to a place of healing, but the moment I took the Band-Aid off, the Band-Aid, I stopped the healing process. And so this is what we're dealing with is, when people get up to the Thanksgiving holiday, to start off Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday season, they're being now pushed to that point of having to forgive. Because true Thanksgiving, you can't give true Thanksgiving and you still have unforgiveness. According to the word, I don't care what nobody say, according to the word. I'm not talking about our personal opinions. I'm talking about according to the word. You truly do not have forgiveness. You just pretending for that time. And so again, it brings us to the edge of that healing process to begin to forgive whoever and whatever did, whatever they did.
So
But
Nadella,
if you're not really ready, you're going to keep going through the motion year after year after year, like I did, until I finally said, you know what? Okay, let's do this. Let's do this once and for all.
oh, stop right there, Nadella. Stop right there for a minute, because hold on. Because now that leads me into, let's talk about the elements of forgiveness.
Okay,
Because
so
that's going to fall
please.
in. That's going to fall into the elements of forgiveness. And to me, let me say the first element of forgiveness. Go ahead, Nadella. You go first.
No, I just wanted to acknowledge Cynthia before we went too far, is that she says healing has to be intentional. Absolutely. So go ahead.
And Cynthia fell right into what I was getting ready to say. Number
Okay.
one, you have to be transparent.
Yeah.
Because again, when you're transparent, it means you're being intentional
Yes.
about what happened and how you're going to deal with it.
But
And
being transparent to whom? Because people.
Well, you have to, number one, be transparent with yourself.
That's what my point was.
Because number one, you can't keep blaming somebody else for something that you put yourself into.
Absolutely.
So
or you allowed, which is still
exactly.
kind of along the same line. Yeah.
So when you're being transparent, that means you're being honest.
Yes, absolutely.
You're not looking at anybody else's fault. You're looking at your fault.
And I'm going to tell you, it was not easy for me. It was not easy for me.
Honestly,
and I imagine for pretty much anybody else.
Exactly.
It's not an easy process.
And that's the thing. When you have to look at yourself in the mirror and realize that you screwed up, oh, that's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
But for all this time, you've been blaming everybody else. Yes. And now you got to look directly at yourself and what role you played in all of this. And you probably played the major role. Yes. Because again, that person, that thing could have been out of your life or your situation a long time ago. Yep. But you held on to it.
Yeah, and I'm only laughing because you hitting the nail on the head, and I definitely identify with what you're saying. Yeah.
And so because you held on to it and you didn't want to let it go, you were so scared that if you let it go, something or that thing would never come back. But and you prevented yourself from getting something better, or that something better bypassed you because you wanted to be stuck in that same place.
I got to give you some fire for that, Derek.
Thinking based on your feelings, how you felt at that time, that everything was okay.
Yes. Yes.
And then when that poor thing falls apart, now you're hurt.
Yes.
And you're depressed. And all of this stuff is because you allowed yourself to stay in that same place when God was telling you it was time for you to move on. Let it go, move on, let it go, move on. And he even sent people in your path to tell you this is what he's telling you.
Yes.
But you stayed there because, it felt right.
Mm-hmm.
And then when all of a sudden it felt right because you were comfortable.
Yes.
But I learned this in my lifetime. The longer you hold on to something that you want and not what you need, it's hard for you to forgive yourself.
I agree.
Because to me, in my life, I held on to a lot of things. Yeah. And I'm going to be transparent with you. When my brother passed, I had a lot of resentment because people that should have been there wasn't there. And then all of a sudden, when the situation got to where to the end, they were there. Mm-hmm. So me, I was bitter. And the problem that I had, is I had to learn that wasn't for me to deal with. Mm-hmm. That person was going through more than what I was going through because they had to deal with their part in the situation.
Mhm.
And my part was not to be angry,
Yes,
but my part was, did I do everything that I was supposed to do during this transition period?
absolutely. And that's key because like I said is, you know, I started to heal and this is one of the things, one of our character flaws, I believe, as just as a human being. The moment we start feeling better about anything, whether it's from a cold, the flu, or headache, or about a relationship or a situation, the moment we start feeling better, oh, I'm healed, so I can now go and get into another relationship or start another friendship, or I can get up and go now, start running back around outside, you know, when we have not allowed ourselves to heal completely. And like I said, and I'm going to keep using this to help us to understand in the simplest form, is that the Band-Aid is put there to ensure that you have full healing without any further contamination. And so we will recontaminate, my God, we will recontaminate ourselves before we are fully healed, because if we're fully, once we're fully healed, those contaminants cannot get in there anymore because there's no opening. What once was an opening has now been closed because you fully healed, my God.
But wait a minute, let's go even a little bit further than that, Nadella.
Go ahead, let's go,
So,
let's go.
So with these openings in the healing process, one thing about a healing process is when you're going through the healing process, there are things that cannot go in that womb.
Absolutely.
And so when you allow the womb to close up those things that were trying to contaminate the womb, the Band-Aid is there to protect the contaminants from coming in. And even though, let's say the Band-Aid is a covering of a contaminant, but let's talk about even some of the people that come in your life.
Same
when
thing.
you allow certain people to come in and contaminate your womb becomes dirty again.
Yes.
And so when that
you
womb
get an infection
again, exactly. And so that womb again has to be retreated because of the infection. And that's like some people we allow to come back and forth in our life at will, is we getting infected by the same thing because again, we say we let it go.
Yes.
But then we allow them to come in with slick words or slick things that they do or nice gestures and everything. And then they come back in and then we want to forgive who? The person? But we have not forgiven ourselves because again, when we allow those people to come in, and listen, that's not saying you can't be friends, but sometimes you have to distance yourself from certain type of friends.
Yes.
And so
you really do.
And so again, once you distance yourself, you don't have to worry about reinfecting the same wound because now you've gotten past that individual. And so you know how we always say people are in your life for a season. We have to learn to let them go. And instead of us letting them go, we still try to harbor them in our lives. Everybody is not going to be in your life always. They are there for a season to teach you, to allow you to gain strength or whatever purpose they serve.
Whatever purpose.
We have to look at whatever purpose they are. When God says it's time for them to leave, let them go. It may be hard, you may be, and again, there's nothing wrong with crying. There is nothing wrong with crying because again, that's an emotion that we have to, in fact,
that brings about, and it brings about healing. But I can't tell you how much in agreement that I am on that. One of the things that we have to be diligent about is identifying why is this person in my life? And this is something that I've really been, especially since I've been here. When somebody send me a friend request and then, they reach out and they want to start chatting me up, and immediately I'm like, okay, God, why are they here? I immediately go into perhaps defense mode only because when you understand that you don't want to keep getting hurt. Just because you forgive doesn't mean that you're just going to keep putting yourself out there to keep getting hurt either. So whenever somebody, comes into my life, not just through social media, if I'm at the store and if I feel friendly enough, I'll give them a phone number, not the phone number. I'll give them a phone.
So
That's another thing.
Let me get
And
into
then
this.
And like I said, I always say, okay, God, why are they here? What purpose are they in my life? What is it that they either need from me or I need from them, or both?
And Nadella, you walked right into my second thing about transparent is number one. Number two is acknowledgement, because we need to acknowledge a couple of things. Number one, we have to acknowledge that we're there because we were not transparent.
Yes.
And so when we start acknowledging things, we start thanking the person for allowing us to be put in that situation for us to get out of it.
Yes.
And so my healing process, when I acknowledged that it wasn't just totally the other person, but I played a role in it, I start apologizing.
Yes.
Because you don't understand how much you play a role in something until you hear it come from the other person's mouth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I had to acknowledge that I played a role in what happened in my life because I was not transparent. And I was not, and the other thing is I was making excuses, as we as human automatically do, keep making excuses.
Yes.
So the other part to acknowledging and being transparent is number one, gestures.
Yes.
Because again, we make so many gestures about, or body actions or body language about things that we don't like or we can't acknowledge because we can't understand it.
Right.
And so when we start understanding it, now we're in the element of forgiveness, because at this point here, I was being transparent. I acknowledged my role in the situation.
Yes.
But not only did I acknowledge my role in the situation, I apologized for my role in the situation, even though I didn't know.
Now, see, okay, so you just transitioned and brought about the whole crux of this conversation of you have to acknowledge. Without the acknowledgement, there is no healing, there is no moving on. You are going to find yourself back in this and just repeating that same cycle, whether it's with the same person or same situation or different person or different situation. So it's key that we start acknowledging that, you know what, I did allow it, and learn not to be too hard on yourself. Don't forget, we're human beings. Just because we are preachers, ministers, singers, or just, people in general, we are human beings at the foundation of everything. We are going to make wrong decisions, even in our best efforts to make the right decision, to choose the right friend, to choose the right partner. Now, families, we can't quite choose, so that's a little different. But ultimately, the things that we can choose, when we realize that was the wrong decision, just say, you know what? Yeah, you know what? That was the wrong decision. But like you said, let it be a learning lesson. Really let it be a learning lesson. And that's what I do for every failed relationship with either a man or friendship. I allowed it to be a learning lesson for the next relationship. So now I know what to do or what not to do for the next friendship or the next relationship, giving myself a better chance of it working out.
Now, Nadella, that goes back into my next thing about the elements of forgiveness. Self-preservation.
All right. Ooh,
so when you start talking about self-preservation, you start protecting yourself from things that come in that may harm you, because now you've acknowledged that this particular thing was something that came in it hurt you, you apologize to the individual, but now you have to preserve yourself from falling back into that same situation.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
when you start preserving yourself, you start your antlers come up. You
Yes.
start looking around to make sure those people that are interacting with you are not the same or don't have
Yep.
the same tendency that the
Yes.
situation you just got yourself out of,
Yes.
that you're not going to put yourself back in that situation. And self-preservation also means that I'm not going to move too fast.
Absolutely. Oh, definitely. Listen,
So a
I
lot
will
of
have you sitting on a dock of the bay for a long time.
So when people start to move too fast, or you get somebody that come into your life that want to move too fast,
Yeah.
those antlers gonna come up, because why is this person trying to push me? No, they know you're not ready.
Mhm.
And the idea is that they're trying to push you to do something that you're not ready for.
Well, so I will say it wasn't that I wasn't ready. So I had a guy who, after knowing him for a year, he talking about getting married. And I'm not saying, because I don't believe in dating somebody for 500 years before we decide, okay, yay or nay. But I couldn't quite put my finger on it. But he was like, yeah, I definitely want to marry you. And I'm like, okay. Now, in my younger days, I would have been shoot. My head would have been bigger than a rhinoceros butt because a man wants to marry me. But at that age, which was I was just over my 40s, and I'm like, really? I said, why do you want to marry me? So he gives me all this superficial stuff, which is what they do. Mm-hmm. And I told him, I said, well, I said, listen, I said, I'm not in a rush to get married. I said, do you see a D in my forehead? He said, no. I said, I asked that question because I'm not desperate. I don't need to get married. I don't have to get married. I said, we'll get there. I said, I just want to walk this out. Let us, take our time to get to know each other. And so he kept pushing, wanting to get married. And my antennas went up and I started getting a little anxious. And so I started triggering him. And what I mean by triggering him, I would say certain things to him. And he was like, oh, I didn't know you was like that. My point exactly. You sitting here talking about you want to get married. You don't know my sleeping habits. So I went to visit one time and he made breakfast. Now I tell everybody, I don't like cheese. I don't put cheese on my food. He puts cheese on my eggs. And he sat it down in front of me. I said, I'm not eating that. He was like, why not? I said, because I told you I don't eat cheese. He got upset. But I already told you I don't like cheese on my food. When have you ever seen cheese on my food? So he had to cook my food again. So he got upset about it. And, so I started showing him different personality traits of who I was and how I can be. And then he was like, but he's still talking about he wanted to marry me. I said, no, you don't. I said, so I cut it. I said, nah, you ain't gonna jack me up. So I cut it. I cut the relationship.
So Nadella, let me get into my last element of forgiveness. Totality. So those y'all that don't know what totality means, it means being whole, the sum. So before you can commit yourself to someone else and forgive yourself, you have to be totally honest with yourself. And that means whole honestly with yourself and telling yourself that you're not going to allow yourself to be in this situation because now you're healed from this situation.
Yes.
And so whatever comes in after you become whole again, you're not going to allow to put you back where you were.
Definitely.
So,
Listen, I'll fight you tooth and nail, Derek, before that happens again.
and so with totality, it means that it's not looking at the other person. It looks at you as the total person.
Yes. Yes.
And so when you start looking at yourself as a total person, then you can be healed beyond measures. Because because part of you don't get healed. Yes. The whole you has to get healed. Because even though one part experienced something, the other parts of your body still suffer damage.
Yes. Yes.
And so when you start talking, you talk about totality, you talk about your heart, because you've been hurt. Now your heart has to heal. You talk about your mind. Your mind has to think differently.
Yes.
So your feet have to move differently.
Yes.
Your space, the space that you allow yourself to be in, has to be different.
Absolutely. Your environment. Yes.
So when you start talking about totality, the true definition of forgiveness is you have to totally be in control, totally be honest with yourself, totally go through the transformation period to become whole.
Yes.
And then when you go through all those processes, then you are there at the point of forgiveness, because now it's not as hard for you to forgive yourself.
Yeah.
Because you've gone through each process to identify how to forgive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so everyone, if y'all see how Derek walked us through and he talked about each step or each component within that process, you cannot skip stuff. And again, you can't have the Band-Aid on for 2 days and then you take it off and you have it off for 3 days. And then you put another Band-Aid back on and you'll have it on for 1 day and then you take it off. No. You have to leave that Band-Aid on for the entire time. Obviously, you got to change the Band-Aid, but you have to have a Band-Aid or a bandage, whatever it takes, to make sure that that particular area is fully healed. And when I finally got to the point of understanding that my decision-making, some of it was definitely flawed. Going back to, we got to be honest with ourselves. Some of our decision-making is flawed. And so we got to learn from those wrong decisions that we've made. Don't beat yourself up. Don't kill yourself. But above all, take ownership. Take ownership for your role in what happened in that relationship. Again, whether you was the cause or whether you allowed the other person to do what they did. Either way, you played a role in that relationship. And again, we're not just talking about a relationship between romantic people. I'm talking about friendship, familyship, workship. We got a lot of different types of relationships today that we are having to manage. For those who work, you got co-workers. For those who are in a relationship, whether you're dating, courting, or you're actually married, and you have family, you got your children. So we're managing and even to some degree juggling multiple relationships. But and what happened with me is that my unforgiveness was straight across the board. It affected everybody. And that's really not good to do. And so when you get to that threshold of saying, you know what, I've had enough, not only that one bad relationship that caused you to be in that situation or to cause you to now not have forgiveness, it affects all your relationships, whether you realize it or not. As much as you may even try not to allow it to affect them, at some point it does. And this is why Derek also talks about being totally healed, because when you are totally healed, then all of your relationships are healed. For me, I'm not afraid of dating now. I know that, I bombed like about 20 times now, and I'm just saying 20, but I know I've bombed in dating about 20 times now. But because I am healed, I'm not afraid to date. I just know, okay, Nodella, you done been through this about 20 times, so don't go running in blind.
Mhm. Well
Don't
put.
go running in blind. Be smart about it. And just, again, just take your time. And so that's what I do. When a guy tries to rush me into a relationship, automatically, that's a purple, red, green, yellow, red flag for me. And you are now dismissed. Because I'm like, why are you trying to rush me into a relationship and you don't even know me like that? And so for me, now I don't have a problem. I don't struggle with telling anybody that I love you. Hey, y'all, I love y'all. I used to struggle with that. But now I don't struggle with that. Why? Because as you said, I've gone through that process. It wasn't easy, and it sure had its painful moments. But because I wanted to be whole, I had to go through it. So I want to encourage each and every one of you on tonight who's watching, who's going to watch the replay. Hopefully you'll watch it all the way to the end. Don't allow your previously failed relationships, no matter what the kind of relationship it was, please don't let it dictate your future relationships from a negative perspective. Allow it to be a guide, but don't allow it to govern it so much to where you actually meet somebody who's good, and because you remember your last BFF, dogged you out, you hold them at bay. And again, everything has a process, but don't allow yourself to get caught up the way that I did, because we are not talking about 5 years I lived in a life of unforgiveness. And when I tell you that I lived in a life of unforgiveness, with unforgiveness comes bitterness, comes anger, comes malice, comes wrath. I mean, every possible negative emotion that you could think of came with that unforgiveness. But because I didn't have a support system, because I didn't have somewhere to go, I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to process through it properly the way that Derek explained it. Now I know. And so I, again, if I feel you're flaky, then I deal with you accordingly. But I don't no longer allow what happened in the past to control what friendships that I have. I just allow them to govern. So if you still have any unforgiveness in your heart, I want to encourage you, if you believe in God, to pray and ask God to help you to heal from that unforgiveness, because it's not good to have unforgiveness. It's not. Like I said, it's a lot of emotions that comes along with it, and it eventually affects your health. And I'm telling you from what I experienced, not what from somebody else, but I'm telling you what I've gone through. And so I've purposed in my life, even today, even when I know somebody has dogged me, even when I know that somebody has talked about me behind my back, dragging my name through the mud and all that stuff, I ask God that no matter what a person does to me after that day, help me to forgive them. Because people, another saying is, they say hurt people hurt people. So I don't know what that person may be going through to cause them to behave that way. And so I've learned to give people the benefit of the doubt. If they've done something that was hurtful to me, I give them the benefit of the doubt that they're going through something, and they're just lashing out because they're hurting. If you want to reach out to me, if I can be any kind of a resource to you, please message me. I'll give you my number. I'm not going to put it on the air. But I'll be more than happy, to talk to you based on what I've gone through. But you can get through this. And our desire for this discussion was to help us all to recognize that don't allow forgiveness to be seasonal. As we talked about, that's why the topic is 'tis the season for forgiveness, because people's forgiveness is seasonal. They can only forgive you now while it's Christmas and Thanksgiving. And then, like Derek said, once that season is past, now they're back to hating your guts. You don't have to live like that. and you should not have to live like that. So before Derek, hold on. I know you want to chime in, but hold on. I need to do something right quick. I need to do something right quick. Hold on. So our time is up, but I need to do something right quick. Hold on. Oh, here we go. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday, cuz.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Y'all can cash at me for that rendition of happy birthday. Y'all can cash at me.
So let me close by saying today is my birthday, but emotionally, I'm here but not here because my twin brother died last year. For those of y'all who know, Thanksgiving, the 24th, we share the same birthday. So today, this morning, I woke up with a prayer to myself, and the things Kia sent me some nice words of encouragement, and one of the things that I have to say, when you have a circle of people who truly and honestly care about you, care about your emotional state, and care about you just in general, it's good to have those people. The other thing is that this has been one of the, this is actually the first year that I'm dealing with it. And I have to say, I had to learn to forgive myself because I felt bitter. I had to learn to forgive myself because I blamed other people for things that they took no part in. So I woke up this morning because I had to say to myself, Derek, if you want to see another year, you have to forgive whatever happened last year. Whatever God's plan was, it was God's plan. And so with God's plan, you can't question God. The situations in our lives happen for a reason. When people leave, they leave for a reason, but it should only make you a better you. The things is that you need to remember, and that's the thing about death. It's not for you to forget the person. It's things that you and that person shared that you should remember. And you should always remember because that's how you carry that person in your heart. So this was actually an on-time conversation talking about forgiveness, the different levels and how to endure or learn to get past yourself, to forgive yourself or forgive other people. So with that being said, I thank everybody for all the happy birthday wishes. Nadella, you know I love you. All our watchers and viewers, please share this with other people, especially this season. We lost so many people last year to COVID.
Yeah.
And so we have to be stronger. We have to get past our bullheadedness. We need to forgive people while they're here, give them their flowers while they're here. I don't want you standing over me, handing me some flowers when we didn't get past our disagreement.
Absolutely.
And so with that being said, thank you, everybody. I love you and I enjoyed the show.
All right. So again, everyone, we love you. We are grateful to you. So next week we will be going live. Derek won't be live with us. So I may reach out to one of you to fill in and be our special guest co-host on next week. And if you're interested, reach out to me. If you would like to be our special guest co-host on next week, reach out to me and let's talk about it. Let's come up with a something that we can talk about. And Kia, I haven't forgotten, so we got that other subject, and that's going to actually be our grand finale for 2021. So we are going to get that together in the next couple of weeks. So until next time, everyone, have yourself a blessed evening. Stay warm and certainly stay safe, but above all, forgive, 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 because God forgave each and every one of us. Christ forgave each and every one of us. And you want me to tell you what the difference is? We were guilty. He was not. We were guilty of every single thing, but he was not. Yet he forgave us even though we were guilty. So please ask it. And again, if you believe in God, ask him to help you. If you don't believe in God, ask someone else to help you. Ask them, how did you get through it? And that's something that we don't share enough about, is how did we make it over, if you will? How did we get through a particular situation? And like I said, I'm here if you need me, and I can say the same if Derek don't mind. You know, reach out to Derek as well. He did a phenomenal job tonight. You know, so again, please forgive, and don't wait for a special anything, because you don't know whether you're going to be here or whether they're going to be here. But while you have the opportunity, forgive them. Even if you don't tell them that you forgive them, you know that you forgive them. And lastly, forgive yourself above all else. So until next week, everyone, have yourself a wonderfully blessed night and weekend.
Good night.